Hi everyone, thanks for joining us again today. Today I have a very special guest, a friend, right, and just wanted to and someone who I really respect, and very honored to have him with me. Just a little bit of background about him. At the age of 17, my guest today forayed into the technology sector with his first venture, Vodien Internet Solutions. Under his leadership, the company grew to become Southeast Asia's largest web hosting provider, with more than 150 employees across four countries, serving more than 35,000 clients. In 2017, Vodien was acquired by Dreamscape Networks for $30 million, the largest transaction seen in Southeast Asia for a pure play hosting company without raising a single cent of venture capital. After the acquisition, he spent the next few years traveling the world, exploring new hobbies like snowboarding, kite-surfing, and many more. He has also become an angel investor and has invested in companies like Kronikare, which is a company providing wound care solutions using artificial intelligence. We'll get into that in a little while. He also created a scholarship fund for his alma mater, mentored students, and spoke at various events about entrepreneurship and his journey. Currently, he is a mentor, coach, and advisor to many entrepreneurs in scaling up their businesses using his proprietary framework at superscaling.com, and is also the chairman at cloudy.com Private Limited, taking care of clients' hosting needs so that you can go on the cloud easily, enjoy speed, simplicity, security, and stability. And with that, please allow me to welcome the one and only Alvin Poh. Okay, Alvin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Awesome to be here.
Thanks for joining us again. Really appreciate it. You taking time off. Hope you. I understand that you just came back from America. Hope that trip went really well for you. Right. How was that?
Yeah, thankfully everything went well. Right in the
That's
middle
great.
of the trip was when they announced that the Omicron variant was happening, and everybody was panicking. So that was a
Mhm.
little bit of a scare, but thankfully got back okay. So yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for joining us again. So just wanted to touch base a little bit. I understand that at a tender age of 17, you actually started a business in cloud hosting, or rather in web hosting and stuff like that, right? So maybe you want to just kind of like touch a little bit on that story a little bit more. I know
Sure.
whatever I introduce doesn't do justice to that. So it's
Yeah,
17 years
Yeah,
compressed
it's a
into one paragraph.
long story, man. It like even the start was something that I think uh wasn't a straight path, right? It wasn't like I woke up one day and I thought to myself, hey, you know what? I'm gonna start a hosting company. That was never
Hmm.
the case. It was such a long story though. I have to start in secondary school, and this was when I was
Hmm.
like 15 years old, right?
Wow.
And at that point of time, um, one of the things that happened was that my family got their
Hmm.
first computer. And this was only
Wow.
because my father needed to do paperwork for his sales job, right? He needed to do the
Hmm.
proposals and the I don't know what the forms he needed to do. All that I cared about as a kid back then at the age of 14, 15 was that there was a computer at home. At first, the computer was offline, like no
Hmm.
internet at all. You just booted it up, and then you had software.
Hmm.
This was 1996, I think. Software at that time was still offline. You rarely needed an internet connection for it to work,
Hmm.
versus like the all the cloud and SaaS software that's happening these days.
Hmm.
So I was pretty happy without internet for a while, and then one day we got internet. And this isn't broadband, and this is I think 26K, 26K, I think. Yeah. It's 28K, sorry, 28K, and it was basically just uh what was it called? Dial up with a dial
Wow,
up
that was a long
modem.
time ago.
Yeah, yeah, dude, it was like, so every time you go online, there'll be this like weird noise that the modem will make, and then
Yeah.
you just have to cross your hands, or at least I had to cross my hands because we only had one phone line at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't afford another phone line. That means that if anybody were to pick up the phone when like someone's online, like if I'm online and somebody else picks up the phone in my house, that's it. I'll be
Wow.
disconnected.
Wow.
So that was the state of affairs back then. But I remember one software that I absolutely loved, and that was MIRC.
Mm-hmm.
MIRC was like the granddaddy of Slack. I
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the first version. In fact, I kind of feel like Slack looks a lot like MIRC with like the channels and the DMs and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but as a kid back then, I absolutely loved it because my life was just two parts, right? The void deck in my home that I grew up with, like all the friends that I grew up with, they were all in my void deck, and I'll be playing with them, football, cycling, and whatnot. And then I'll have my friends in school, right? And these are the friends that I will be like, hanging out with at school or after school. But that's pretty much it. These two groups of people. With
Mm-hmm.
MIRC, it just expanded my reach, right? Suddenly I could be talking to people that were from other schools in Singapore, other age ranges in Singapore, and I think more importantly, from countries outside of Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
So that just blew my mind, and I loved it. It
Wow.
just made me feel like the world, like that phrase, the world is your oyster. That just made me
Mm-hmm.
feel like that. And MIRC just captured my attention. So I actually learned scripting and programming and graphics design from MIRC.
I see.
Yeah, and
Wow.
long story short, I think spending all that time on the computer just basically got me to be a web designer, and then from there, uh, web design was the first iteration of Vodien, and then Vodien
Mm-hmm.
iterated, or rather pivoted. I think the word is pivoted to become a web hosting company. That's
I
how we got
see.
started.
I see. Wow. So maybe since I understand that you are kind of like coaching people to scale companies, so just wanted to understand a little bit more of that journey of scaling Vodien from, I understand it was a two-man team to a 150-man team, and what were the challenges that you faced, etc., and how you overcame them, etc. Yeah, it would be great if
Oh,
you could share some of
that's
this.
yeah, there were so many challenges. Like I remember one time when we were growing, um, so this was I think about 2 or 3 years into our growth already, and we were looking at ways to really expand. And we hired marketing agencies, and this time this agency was supposed to help us with our SEO, search engine, right? And with this search
Uh,
engine optimization, it basically allowed us to rank on search engines, and it was literally Google at that time. I'm not sure what's happening with the screen. I seem to be like my screen seems to be jumping all over the place.
Hey Alvin, sorry, I think I had some issues with my internet earlier. How I wished I had those the kind of service that Vodafone was providing. Um, yeah, so sorry, apologies. You were saying?
Sorry, I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
So I think we were talking a little bit more about the scaling up process for Vodien from a two-man team into I think 150-man team, and some
Ah,
challenges that you faced as an entrepreneur, as well as some
right.
solutions that you used to kind of like overcome those.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I was talking about the time when I was, the company was working on various like marketing agencies. At that point in time, we were using this search engine optimization agency, and we signed a contract with them. They seemed legit, but what happened after that was, it turns out they were using less than legitimate means to allow us to rank on Google. Um, so things worked well at the start, and then suddenly everything went to hell. Everything
Wow.
just fell apart. Google banned us, and as a tech company, we found ourselves not even able to be found on Google, and that was just insane. So it took us a few months to get back.
Wow. So
Yeah.
that must have been a pretty harrowing experience, I suppose.
Yeah, it was. So that really taught us the need to diversify our channels, to understand what our sales channels are, to understand what our marketing channels are, and create them in the form of like engines, right? That will work,
Mhm.
um, and not just having one. We're having like multiple of these engines, so that you always have a constant source of leads and customers. That was a valuable lesson that we learned, and that's one of the things that I tell my clients also, to always have like your sales engines, your marketing engines all detailed out, and having multiple of them as well.
Cool. So that was interesting. So understand that when you went from a two-man team to a 150-man team, that is a huge difference in terms of handling people and the kind of dynamics that we are looking at. So what were some of the methods that you ensured the efficiency and effectiveness in terms of customer service, in terms of your operations in your company while you scaled to that 150-man team? And what were the kind of like checkpoints that you used to make sure that things were running really smoothly?
Yeah. So people tend to think that, or at least for me, that was the case. People tend to think that it was always about the capabilities that you have, the knowledge that you have, and everything's about you, right? But as a business owner, one of the greatest mindset shifts that you can have is to really start to think of business as something that leverages both your team and your systems. Once you do that, you'll be able to start scaling. And it's literally changing the question from what can I do to what can we do. So, in the first initial years of Vodien, I remember myself having like so many limiting beliefs that just held me back. One of the beliefs that I had was like I should do everything. My family had um, this work ethic instilled in me, that you should always be hardworking, and you should always have this like sense of responsibility and all that, which I still have, but I realized that it was just in a different context. The context is management and knowing how to delegate. So one of the things that I learned was that, right, delegation, making sure that you could manage a team, and leveraging on the resources that you have as a business owner, so that the business can grow bigger than who you are or what you are. I think that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned that allowed us to scale.
Wow. So that must have been a pretty interesting experience for you after scaling up. I understand that your company got acquired for $30 million by a ASX listed company called Dreamscape Networks. So congratulations on that, right? So
Thank
what
you.
what kind of made that connect? How did you guys get connected? to your acquirers, and what made you decide to say, hey, it's time to let go, uh, time for the acquisition to happen so that they can potentially take Vodien to the next level?
Cool. Let's do the first question first. Well, they found us actually in
That's
that at the point
nice.
of time. It was 2016, I think, or 2017. Actually, those years, I think it started from about 2014, 2015 onwards. There was so much attention in Southeast Asia, especially in the hosting space, and that space was white hot, like all around the world, in Europe, in North America, in Australia, Japan. There was a lot of attention already, but Southeast Asia was always left alone for some reason. And then in those years, attention started coming towards Southeast Asia, and we were the largest in Southeast Asia at that point of time. And people were naturally like gravitating towards us. Every time, and this was pre-COVID, right? So every time, every quarter, there usually be an event, at least one event, like a conference or an exposition, or whatever meeting that was there. And all these foreign people would come to Singapore for that meeting, and whenever they are there, they usually would just like line up meetings, and
Hmm.
they'll come to us. They'll say that they were in town, and want to meet up, right? And almost always they would have um uh some hint of an M&A, right? Some are more indirect, some are much more direct, some are very straightforward about it. But they're
Hmm.
always hinting at the possibility of an M&A, right? And so for the people that are not very interested or not very serious, we just like maintain relationships with. But there were a few that we started talking to, but there was nobody that we were absolutely serious with until Dreamscape came along. The difference between Dreamscape and everybody else was that almost everybody else that came to us were either private equity or funds, or were not the operators of the businesses. Some of them were very large hosting businesses in Europe, for example, but they were
Hmm.
not operator led already. It was a CEO that came in that wanted to expand the brand. So it's very, very different until
I
Dreamscape
see.
came along. Dreamscape is and was at that point of time still 100% founder led. The person that was running the company was the founder, and they grew it to be Australia's largest
Wow.
hosting company. So when we started talking, we realized that there were so many like parallels between our companies. Both of us were founder led. We started from nothing. We grew the business from nothing as well. And yeah, I remember there was one particularly uncanny like coincidence where we discovered that our offices in the Philippines were literally like beside each other.
Wow.
Like, not on the same floor, but like we were in buildings that were next to each other. So
Hmm.
that was super uncanny. I remember one day I visited my office, and then I just literally just crossed the street and visited them as well. So yeah, it was that sense of familiarity, I think, that made us comfortable with Dreamscape. And
I
so we
see.
thought that it was possible that both of us get together. They were
Mhm.
obviously bigger because just in terms of sheer size, if you are the biggest in Singapore, just in terms of population,
Yep.
you're not still not very big.
Hmm.
They were the biggest in Australia, and in terms of population, Australia is like 4 times the size of Singapore, and they
Hmm.
were also about 4 times the size of us. So it had to be a whole acquisition, and so our company Vodien got acquired,
Hmm.
and we had the initial plans of expanding in Southeast Asia together while
Hmm.
retaining our brand, while retaining the Vodien brand. Um, yeah, so that was the initial plan, and that's how the acquisition got started.
I see. So what happened after the acquisition? I understand that there were, of course, some cultural differences.
Yeah, there were. We stayed on for a year. So the acquisition happened
Mhm.
in 2017, and I stayed on for 1 year. We left in 2018.
I see.
Um, the initial plan didn't work out. I think there was some like conflicting opinions on how to handle customer
Sure.
service, how to handle expansion plans.
Mhm.
So we decided to leave. My co-founder and I, we decided to leave.
Mhm.
That happened in 2018, and after that, I
Wow.
decided to sell everything I had. Finally, having the time and space to myself to really travel the world full time, and I
Mhm.
did that for 2 years. So that was
Wow.
a really really good break.
I see. I see. That's nice. At least I guess you travel pretty much at least 50% of the world, right? Kind of. Uh,
I'm not like one of those people that has like a long chat list and just checks
yeah.
off things. I think I travel slow,
Mhm.
in the sense that I take my time to visit
Yeah.
like places, and I spend like weeks at a certain place,
Mhm.
just taking my time, meeting local people, absorbing the local culture, getting
I
myself
see.
familiar with the place, before I move on, right?
Mhm.
And I did things like a snowboarding course as well, so
Wow.
that took like 2.5 months in New
That's
Zealand.
nice.
Yeah, surfing courses that took a week, kite surfing that took another week. And like when all the weeks happen, you realize that you don't really have a lot of weeks in a year as you
Mhm.
think, as you had thought. Like I thought 52 weeks was a lot, but when you look at it from like, you break it down and you look at it from like, spending like 4 weeks here and spending like 2 weeks here and spending 1 week here and all that, it starts to add up. And suddenly 1 year
Mhm.
passed, 2 year passed, and before I knew it, um, it was time to come home.
I see. Wow. That was really interesting. And any particular places that you really want to go since we were on that topic?
I think there are a lot of places that I enjoy and I appreciate. The 2 years, I think the greatest takeaway that I had was uh, that of introspection. I think one of the things that I learned the most was about myself.
Wow.
When I was running my business, I literally started it like you said, right? When I was 17 years old. At a point of time at 17 years old, all that I was gonna do was like, figure out how to, have an income, how to have a career. And my whole life was in business, I think. So I never really had the time nor space to really ask myself very important questions. Very important questions such as, what are you gonna do with the rest of your day? That was a question that I asked myself a lot when I was traveling. When you're
Mhm.
traveling, and when in a different place with no friends, or maybe your friends are in a different time zone, and you really have like so many hours to yourself, you start
Mhm.
asking yourself, "Hey, man, what do you want to do, and what do you like to do?" So I learned a lot about my preferences. What drives me, what I'm interested in, what I'm not interested in, and it was basically this whole chapter on self improvement that I went through. So at the end of the 2 years, I learned so much about myself and my personality that it really like helped me understand how to move on to the next chapter, which is what I'm going through right now. Like with super scaling and cldy.com, I think that's something that I didn't really have the
Sure.
vision for back then in
Mhm.
2018.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it had to be developed.
Sure. So, maybe I think a typical, a kind of like good transition to that. Since you mentioned it already, um, what made you decide to kind of come out and become like a coach for new entrepreneurs to kind of scale their businesses? And by the way, I see a book in your background, and I assume that that was a book that you
Over
have
here.
written about scaling. Wow, that's nice. So
Yeah,
for our
super cool.
viewers, I'll post the link to Alvin's book in a bit, right? In the comment section. So feel free to visit his website and purchase some of those. I'm sure it will definitely help you in your business, right? So maybe Alvin, you want to share a little bit more about that and a little bit more about uh what made you decide to do
Yeah,
this?
sure. I would say it stems from, I'd say two main things caused um this realization. So one, when my acquisition happened, I always receive a message from the school, from startups, from founders, typically
Mm-hmm,
through LinkedIn or Facebook,
mm-hmm,
asking me to mentor them, give them advice, meet up with them, have a coffee, tell them my story, stuff like that, right? And
mm-hmm,
I always found it very hard to do so because whenever you have these meetings, typically what's going through the other person's mind is that they're trying to look for this one key piece of knowledge, this piece of information that's going to transform their lives and
mm-hmm.
cause them to be successful in what they are doing.
Kind of like a
Um,
holy grail kind of
yeah, the
thing,
holy
right?
grail, right? But it doesn't work that way. If it works that way, then everybody that's on YouTube or on like Reddit or in the library can
Mm-hmm.
find the answers that they are looking for.
Yep.
But it typically doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm,
So I always found it very, very difficult to communicate with these people because
mm-hmm,
I couldn't help them. I couldn't help them effectively. Number one, I didn't know where they were coming from. Typically,
mm-hmm,
the conversations were like an hour ish.
mm-hmm,
I didn't know where they were coming from, what they've tried, what they didn't try. So everything was all in a mess, and it was
mm-hmm.
very difficult to have effective advice, to have
Wow.
effective mentorship, right, or
Mm-hmm,
whatever it is that they were looking for. So that was the first thing, right?
mm-hmm,
And this was a problem that I continually faced. So it was something that was like annoying at me, and it was a
mm-hmm,
problem that I was like thinking about, wondering how best to solve. The second thing that happened was the fact that I took a snowboarding course, the snowboarding course that I mentioned just now, that was 2.5 months long. That course was gonna train and certify me as a snowboarding instructor.
wow.
What was interesting about that was the fact that, I don't know about you, but when I look at snowboarders, they are not the most rigorous or structured or systematic person or people that I think, right.
Mm-hmm.
Typically snowboarders are very laid back, they look very chill, they look, yeah, I guess those are the two
A little
words,
bit more relaxed.
right, more relaxed, like, yeah. So imagine my surprise when I went through the course and
Mm-hmm,
I discovered that they actually had a really, really structured way of teaching. So,
mm-hmm,
very structured way of certifying someone, and a very structured way of training up students as well. So,
mm-hmm,
when I went through it, I was amazed and I was pretty shocked at it. I've never actually learned how to be a teacher before. I've always
mm-hmm,
I was always at the student end of things, so I was
mm-hmm,
always receiving instruction and not really like giving instruction. So to
mm-hmm,
go through this course actually showed me how structured you need to be as a coach, especially in a sport like snowboarding, because it's not just theory that you're teaching about; it's also about skills, like practical skills, right? And
mm-hmm,
so when you have a snowboarding instructor and a student, you've got to be prepared for all kinds of possibilities. The student could be a 6 year old, the student could be a 26-year-old, or the student could even be a 60-year-old, right?
mm-hmm,
And depending on who you're instructing, like what you're saying, what you're doing, the way you're teaching has got to change and shift as well.
mm-hmm.
So I went through the whole course, right? It was just an eye opener for me.
I see.
Um, One movement can be broken down into three different ways of teaching. Like I remember they used a lot of the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic way of
Mm-hmm,
instruction. So you don't just show people how to do it. Like you don't do a physical you don't just do a physical demonstration. You layer it up with like being very auditory about it, like walking people through the various sensations and feelings that you get
Mm-hmm.
as you're performing the action. So you're talking about where your body is, where your shoulder is, what your head is looking at, the sensations in your boot and the feeling that you get in your board. All that is explained verbally, and then also kinesthetically as well, where you talk about like things that actually, like how things actually move. So all these things was such an eye opener to me, and I discovered that one of the greatest ways to communicate effectively is by using a framework
Mm-hmm.
or models. So once you have framework and models, it's so much easier to communicate to people, to tell people what's on your mind, and to get them to understand what you're trying to say.
Wow.
So it was a combination of these two things, right? All these people asking me for advice, as well as me going through a snowboarding instructor course, that made me realize that I could actually like combine the two and really be an entrepreneurship coach, so that I could codify the knowledge that I had in my mind as an entrepreneur that went through like over 2 decades of entrepreneurship into a framework that people could understand, and they could apply to their business, and so they could get the results that I also got.
Wow.
And that was the birth of super scaling.
I see. I also understand that we there you also did some angel investing before that, and
Yeah.
just wanted to I mean just for full disclaimer, Alvin and I, we sit on the same cap table of a company medtech company called Kronikare, which is why I kind of brought that up earlier in his introduction. So what made you start angel investing, and eventually what when Kronikare came, what was the resonating factor for you to kind of like say, okay, I'm going to back this, right? Because I understand that different angels have different ways of looking at slicing up deals. Um,
Yeah.
so just wanted to hear a little bit about that, and then also I understand that you have decided that angel investing wasn't your cup of tea. Maybe you just want to share a little bit why on that as well, kind of like why you decided that it wasn't your cup of tea.
Yeah, sure. So that was, I think, when I went into angel investing, that was probably about 2018 as well.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went through that, it was basically in a phase of my life where I told myself that I wouldn't say no to anything.
Mm-hmm.
I basically tried everything. I
Yeah.
tried, like, I went to learn plumbing. I did angel investing. I went to live with Mongolian nomads. I was like doing
Wow.
all kinds of stuff. So angel investing was one of them. The way I angel invest is basically to look at people, to look at
Mm-hmm.
the founding team, to look at the management team, and to see how they are, what they're trying to achieve. That's how
Mm-hmm.
I look at companies. And Kronikare was a great example because they had like such great people. Ali and
Mm-hmm.
Hussein, I think, were amazing. Very,
Yep.
very passionate about their space, and had so much domain expertise that I think it was
Yep.
like pretty much a no-brainer.
Yep.
But angel investing in itself is a full-time job. I've come to realize that it's not something that you can just like rock up and
Mm-hmm.
just do occasionally.
Yep.
So for me, I don't really enjoy that, and that's why I realized I
I
cannot
see.
commit to that as a full-time job. I much rather be the entrepreneur, and that's why I started CLDY.
Wow.
Again, that's why I'm doing super scaling right now.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy the entrepreneurship part of things. I enjoy running a team. I enjoy making sure that the business is systematic. I enjoy like creating that kind of positive impact on the customers, on my team. Yeah, that is what drives me.
I see. But from my understanding, CLDY was created by pretty much the same team that you had, right? Your key management guys that you had back in your Vodien days, and you kind of like say, hey, about time we do something together again.
Pretty
And
much. They started a company, and it was basically solving a problem that all of us saw in the space. The space was, hey, who are you going to recommend? If somebody asks you, what hosting provider should I go to? None of us could wholeheartedly recommend anybody. So it
What
was the
about
same
your
problem that
previous
we
company?
saw. So was that?
What about your previous company that you built and sold?
Well, I can't recommend anybody. So that's why we started CLDY.
See?
Yeah.
So wow.
Yeah.
So understand that CLDY is now probably one of the fastest growing cloud hosting providers, at least in Singapore, if not in Southeast Asia. So, what's your vision for that?
Man, it's like the vision that we had in Vodien, but like the version 2 of it, right? We
Mhm.
want to be a company that's global first. Vodien was not global first. Vodien was pretty much just in Singapore, and understandably so, right? Because infrastructure was all physical. We had our own servers, we had our own space in data centers in Singapore, and that really like constrained us. For a while, one of the reasons that we went ahead with the M&A was also because of the lack of funds, mainly because we didn't have that kind of capabilities to expand out of Singapore. So CLDY is cloud first. It's
Mhm.
global first, right?
Yeah.
There's no more physical constraints that hold us back, and we want to bring this mentality not just to serve our customers, but to serve our team as well. We don't want to just have a team in Singapore. Again, back then, Vodien was something that we felt was going to be Singapore first, but it doesn't have to be. It can be global first. People coming from all around the world, right? With just the same alignment in vision and values. I think that's sufficient. And so global first. The second is to be employee led. I think that's something that we didn't do as well in Vodien. Vodien was still pretty much started with my co-founder and I, and then we had management. But we wanted something this time around where everything was employee led. Like it's not a democracy, but we want it to be something that everybody has a voice in, so that we know
Mhm.
that if our team is serving our customers, that they are doing so in the best way that they think is possible, right? And I think that's absolutely necessary, not just for us, but for any business that needs to be that wants to be customer centric, right? It has to also come from the team. So that's a form of I think business leadership that I think is quite lacking as well. And I think CLDY has to do that as one of its core tenets. And then
Wow.
the third is to be, of course, customer centric. I think that's something that's one of the core, not just in CLDY, but also in everything that I'm coaching my entrepreneurship clients about.
Mhm.
To have like customer centricity as one of the core things that binds you and what the company is doing. So I think these are the three things that drive us as a company at CLDY, and that's what's driving us forward right now. The things that we are doing, the things that we're investing in, the things that we're developing in terms of capabilities and values, they're all centered around these 3 points.
Wow. That was great. So, so just to share with you a little bit more, we also kind of discuss a little bit about your views on the future, right? So do you see um, the where do you see your companies, let's say 3 years down the road, given the kind of speed of change in technology, and I kind of like to say this, accelerating change is the only constant. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on where you see your companies,
Yeah.
let's say 3 to 5 years from now.
Oh, big. In terms of impact,
Nice.
we want to scale more than what we were doing in Vodien, right? Again, because of the removal of all these constraints and having all the knowledge that of the lessons that we've made in the past, right? Now we're gonna do something that's even bigger. What exactly are we gonna do? I can't say. Even Facebook couldn't say when they
Mm-hmm.
IPO'd. But I think one thing that definitely is something that is core to us is creating a platform in which our customers, which are businesses, can come online. The
Mm-hmm.
main reason why CLDY exists is because customers such as SMEs and small businesses um, find it very difficult to go online, to go onto the cloud, primarily because it's such a big technological gap. I mean, even right now when things are so advanced and everything is so like, tech savvy, we still have businesses that are unable to go on the cloud effectively. They'll still need either in-house talent or they still need to go through a third party, usually an agency. And this process is very long and convoluted. CLDY wants to bridge that. We want to make sure that we are the one point of contact in which the customers that we serve can just come on board, and we handle all of that for them. We handle everything that they need to do on the cloud, and they can just focus on their core business. So that's something that we want to do right now, and we are doing in the first phase, which is the launch of all these infrastructure services, which is something that we have to still build out. But in terms of what's going to happen 3 or 5 years later, I don't know yet. That's the honest truth. I don't know yet, but
Mm-hmm.
we are definitely knowing the direction that we're headed to, and I believe that as long as we build in this manner, will always be something that the customer requires and something that we can be of service to the customers.
Wow, that's great. Not many entrepreneurs that I've seen personally have that kind of customer centricity in mind. So for the entrepreneurs out there, I just want to let you know that customer centricity has helped Alvin build his business to where he is today, right? And I'm pretty sure that is one of the core values you need in your company in order to actually create a company of that kind of size, right? So that was great advice, Alvin. And I understand that recently there was a huge hype about the metaverse. Do you see Cloudy going into that anytime soon?
Um, I am not in the metaverse or creating services around the metaverse yet. Although I did get the chance to play with an Oculus Rift, the latest version of the Oculus Rift from Meta, and it
Mm-hmm.
was mind blowing. I definitely can see how businesses, how life
Mm-hmm.
can evolve to that point. It's almost like Second Life. It's
Mm-hmm.
a game that I kind of grew up with. I didn't really play it, but it was around, and I know people who were playing it, and it's literally like a second life. You could
Mm-hmm.
have a second life. You have a character or a set of characters. You choose your character, you go in, and they lead lives of their own, right? These people in that world have their own ecosystem, have their own culture, have their own society. Therefore, you could also buy land or a house and have a career. You could set up a shop, a bakery or something, or even a company, selling services, and you could do that in that world. And I think with the metaverse, this is something that's gonna be increasingly gonna be the case. There are a lot of things that push forward this narrative. COVID is one of it. The lockdowns and the quarantines and the removal of travel have pushed forward the narrative of the metaverse actually, because hey, this makes the second life concept much more appealing. We see sci-fi embracing it as well. Like Ready Player One was one of the more like mainstream movies that talked about a second life as well, a life in which you could escape your current situation into a virtual reality world where you could have a second life, a life with everything. So that's a very interesting space, I think. Again, not something that's on my focus right now because I think there's a lot of immediate priorities that need to be
Yep.
solved first. But it's definitely something that I want to scale into once it's there, right? Once things are, uh, they're working and they're solid and they're accepted and they're embraced. That's something that I'm totally into exploring.
Wow. So on that point, the other thing that people have been talking about recently has been artificial intelligence. As you know, I'm probably a huge fan of pushing towards the singularity, right? So for our viewers who don't understand what the singularity means, it is the point in which artificial intelligence um, would sort of surpass human intelligence in most subjects. So what's your take on artificial intelligence? Do you think I mean, I've seen Elon Musk and some billionaires saying that this is going to destroy humanity, but I also seen the other side of the story where they are saying that no, it's not going to destroy humanity. It's going to create sort of a utopia of sorts, right? So, what's your take on that?
Um, I think it's too soon to say. I think one of the best cases or the best ways to predict the future is actually be to be reading sci-fi. I think sci-fi actually predicts a lot of the things that humans will do or will experience. Um, you know, video calls long ago were talked about in sci-fi books.
Mm-hmm.
um, Electric vehicles, they were all stuff that were talked about in sci-fi books.
Robotics.
Robotics as well, yeah,
Yeah.
drones and stuff. They were all talked about. So it's not concepts that are new, especially to sci-fi fans. But that said, there are a lot of different scenarios that are painted in the sci-fi universe. One are, yeah, okay, these devices are great, but then there are also societal impacts. 1984 is a book that is quite telling also,
Mm-hmm.
especially of a dystopian future.
Mm-hmm.
So I honestly don't know and don't have a clue. It really stems from like where the human race is going to. And no matter what happens, right,
Mm-hmm.
it really is up to humans to make use of it. For example, guns, right? It's not that it's good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's really up to like the user that uses it, right? To cause it to be either a positive or negative uh, impact on the world. Right? If it's like a policeman who's using a firearm to prevent a crime from happening, I'd say that's a positive impact. But if it's a mass murderer, like doing a shootout at a school, I think that's a negative impact on the world. But we're still talking about the same guns, right? These are the guns that are invented and created, but who's to
Mm-hmm.
say that it's a bad or good thing? So I think AI has that possibility as well, where it's a tool and how it's used is really left to the hands of the user.
Wow. So I sort of agree with you on that point because a lot of times a lot of people keep saying, hey, this thing is going to create a dystopian future. This thing, I mean, a lot of people say, oh, are we going to have a Terminator situation where AI and robots kind of combine together and they create something really bad? But I guess it's at the end of the day up to us to kind of look into those issues, right? And
Yeah.
AI ethics. I think that's what a lot of researchers are actually looking into as well.
Asimov and the 10 laws.
Yep, I love Isaac Asimov. He's one of my favorite fiction writers, by the way. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I
so
love it. I think sci-fi writers have like the imagination and the foresight to
mhm,
really like predict things in the future. One of the best like um investors, I think, come from like
mhm,
sci-fi fans because they kind of see what's possible, right?
mhm.
And they kind of like actually experience it from the books and the movies that have been like created. And so the future isn't that unrealistic to them.
Agreed. What we do as I mean, I run a venture capital firm, and what we do is sometimes to kind of relax ourselves partially to kind of also try to predict what's going to happen. um we like to within my partnership, we kind of like to read sci-fi because we're trying to say, okay, if this has been sort of imagined, people are going to do something about it at the end of the day, for better or worse, right? And what is the kind of impact that it's going to create with people in general. So this is something that we are also looking into. So hopefully we can kind of have a discussion on that either offline or on another episode as well. So so just wanted to ask if you have any tips, right, for entrepreneurs that you would like to share, right, and kind of say, hey, these are the things that you can do to potentially reach to a $30 million mark, right? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of our listeners would be interested to hear that.
Um, wow, this is literally like finding one tip from like my entire book, I guess. So just to give you an idea, I think the book talks about 5 different principles, starting from who you are as an entrepreneur to the businesses and the teams that you have. I think my tip for somebody is to question the limiting beliefs that you have. Just like I mentioned, there was so many beliefs that I held that I thought were right that were just holding me back. And to really understand that requires some self awareness, some introspection, some self reflection, and figuring out that I think would help you scale, because once again, the things that really keep us back are sometimes the things that we have in our minds. That's why of the 5E scale engine that I have in my book, the very first principle doesn't even cover the business itself. It
Mm-hmm.
talks about the entrepreneur. It talks about the mindset that you have, the beliefs that you have, and how to actually create systems. And from there, that's how you start to scale the business. And then from there, we have the different principles that cover the business itself. So that's my takeaway for everybody. Hopefully that gives you some room for thought. You know, question the beliefs, question why you are doing things, and whether or not it's the best way for you and your business. Yeah, hopefully that helps.
Well, thanks, Alvin. It kind of reminds me of what Peter Thiel always says, right? What is one truth that not many people agree with you on? It's kind of like trying to be a contrarian, but right, right? So I get thanks for sharing that tip on questioning your own limiting beliefs. And hopefully from that you are able to find something that not is true, but not many people agree with you on. So with that, Alvin, thank you once again for coming online with us at such short notice. Right, I really appreciate you sharing, and I apologize for the technical difficulty earlier. Right,
No
please take
worries.
care. Please take care.
Yeah,
Right, looking forward to catching up with you really soon.
yeah.
Right,
Thanks for having me. All right,
so
speak
thank you.
soon.
See you
Yeah.
soon. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.